is Allie, and this is my story of how God took me from shame to grace. It was late one night, a few months before my 22nd birthday. My boyfriend was asleep in the bedroom of my apartment in the projects. My children were in their rooms, asleep, and I lay on the couch trying to silence my cries as I planned how I would end my life. I didn't know God, didn't even know if I believed in his existence, but that night I called out to him, "God, if you're there, please help me." It's not too far-fetched to say that within minutes of that prayer, I knew that there is a God and that he had heard me. I began to sense a presence in the apartment that night that I had never felt before. And I began to sense a change in my being that I hadn't experienced, or that I hadn't experienced in a very long time. That change was hope. My reality that night as I lay on the couch and wept was that I was a 21-year-old divorced mother of 2 children who were already at that time 6 and 5 years old. And I had nothing to offer them. I had no hope of ever being any good for them or anyone else. In fact, my impoverished soul had been running on empty long before they were even born. And their reality had been nothing but poverty as well. Literally, emotionally, spiritually. We were all 3 barely surviving. How does one get to this place of shame and brokenness? It is a path all too familiar to far too many children. A daunting and lonely path of unpredictable, anxious days of a mother with a mental illness. Sleepless, fear-filled nights as parents rage about money, the kids, adultery, divorce. Being in the way of step-parents with their own agendas. Every loss and grief navigated alone because those who should be able to guide you are too absorbed in their own pain and brokenness to notice yours. Neglect and abandonment that leaves one feeling like an outsider, unworthy of love, vulnerable and unprotected. And then there is the overwhelming path that was mine. A mom who believed that her marriage would have been fixed and my dad would have never left if I'd only been born a boy. A mom who saw only 2 options to fix my pregnancy at the age of 14, abortion or emancipation and marriage. I chose the latter. That fix meant dropping out of school the middle of my freshman year. Not 1, but 2 pregnancies, 2 babies before my 17th birthday. More domestic violence, drugs, alcohol, poverty. All of those experiences, the emotional neglect of my mother and the abandonment of my father, had created in me a vacuum where my sense of identity should have been. And that vacuum sucked in all of the darkness and sin of the world around me and formed my identity as it was mirrored to me through the eyes of those whom it drew in. Hungry eyes of empty souls looked at me and saw their prey, an object to be exploited. Angry eyes looked at me and saw an excuse, justification for an unbridled tongue and a violent temper. Haughty eyes looked at me and saw disgrace and turned away in disgust. Apathetic eyes looked at me and saw nothing worth saving, nothing worth fighting for. And the trusting eyes of my children who looked to me for security saw in me instead darkness, confusion, fear, and chaos. On that night, when I called out to God, my soul had nothing to reflect but the shattered identity of worthlessness and shame. But on that night, when I called out to Him, I began to see myself through the eyes of grace. I had no idea where to start, but in the days and weeks ahead, that spark of hope became a quest for light and a hunger and thirst for the knowledge of God and His Word. I didn't even own a Bible at that point, but the presence of God in the apartment that night confirmed for me that, without a doubt, He is real. And I had begun a personal relationship with Him. Over the coming weeks and months, that hope became an unwavering trust. I began to believe what I was reading in His Word, that He had known me and formed me in my mother's womb, as the psalmist said, and that He knew everything about my life prior to that night of me inviting in His presence. The awesome truth began to dawn on me that the Creator of the universe created me for a reason, and that His Son, a perfect being, counted me worthy of the cost of coming to this earth to live and to die. As my soul began to reflect my new identity of Christ in me, I believe that just as God had known me and formed me in my mother's womb, He had known and formed my children in my womb. And that one day my children would look to me and see the power of God to change lives. That where they had seen darkness, they would see light. Where they had seen confusion, they would see conviction. Where they had seen fear, they would see courage. Where they had seen chaos, they would see trust in Him and His plan for me and for them.